Oh, okay.
Right. It was cool that it could be on the national register.
Call the meeting to order. Yes, everybody. Thank you, Ann Baldwin for being here, and Kevin Donnelly from the Conservation District and from the Natural Resources Conservation Service. If we could all say our names, and then so everybody knows who's here.
Mike Marinelli.
Craig Gallagher.
Tish Gallagher.
Gail Sites.
Alice Real.
Rick Pennell.
Okay, first thing on the agenda is the review of the minutes. Did everybody get a chance to review the minutes? Does anybody have any changes? No? Okay.
I just saw one edit
Oh, okay.
on page 2. It's actually under Gail Sites, but there's a the on the second sentence.
Kathy, can you make a note of that? And so with that change, can we agree to approve the minutes? Everybody, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, great. First, I also want to formally introduce and welcome Fred Gallagher to the task force. I really appreciate you stepping up to this after Tommy Wilson wasn't able to continue, and he's our representative from the trustees. So thank you, Fred. Last meeting, I mentioned that I had been in discussion with the Department of Agriculture's Natural Resources Conservation Service. I'm getting fairly good at that. But anyway, and that I had been in discussion with Ann Baldwin from that agency, and she had been very helpful. I explained our situation to Ann about how we're trying to protect the city from future flooding and from the sea level rise. And she indicated that the Watershed Act, I haven't got that quite right, but of the Department of Agriculture might be able to help us in funding engineering and perhaps funding any projects we have in the as part of after the engineering is done. So some people on the task force had some questions about that. So I asked Ann to come and talk to us today. So I'm welcoming anybody to ask a question. I have a couple that will start off, and then please just jump in. When we talked before about the possibilities, it seems so wonderful that my number one thing is, are there any disqualifiers that we might encounter? I know that's kind of a negative way to start, but I'm very nervous because it sounds just exactly what we need. And so for instance, the Department of Agriculture, is there anything about this that would need to have some farms involved or anything like that?
So yes, that's an excellent question. There, for a watershed project, there does need to be approximately 20% of the area or community, however you want to measure it, benefited should be rural or ag related. So I think, as we would determine kind of the scope of the project, we would want to look towards, maybe any of the green space or some of the crop fields that are adjacent.
We do actually have a large farm
You do, yes.
within the city limits,
Right. And
which is the Penn Farm.
yes, yep. And I'm very familiar with that. We've done work on that farm too.
Mhm.
So yeah, we would definitely have to look into, how to meet that
Mhm.
requirement.
But you
it's
think that's a
20%.
possibility that we could overcome that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just depending on, where the rural areas that are affected by the flooding might be in relation to, the
Right.
town.
I also noticed in the materials that and you mentioned, I think on the phone, that the Delaware River Basin is a particular interest of this project. Is that correct? Or of the Watershed Act? And I also noticed it was a part of a question in the,
Yeah, it is mentioned in specifically in our watershed manual. I think because of historical projects within the lot of flood control dams in the upper states, that drain to the Delaware River. And, I can't say I know exactly why, but there are provisions in the manual that talk about, projects within the Delaware River Basin. I think it's really more of a notification, like the Delaware River Basin Authority would be notified of watershed projects within the basin. So, but I don't know that there's any special consideration just because it's within that.
Right,
watershed or
right.
anything, So.
So my next question has to do with our task force. Oh, sure, Mike.
Let's ask you, you mentioned green space as
Mhm.
possibly part of the 20%.
I would have to check on that.
So,
Yeah. Probably, more the fact that the Penn Farm is an active farm.
I was thinking about the green space along the river. We have
Yeah,
a lot of
yeah.
acreage down there.
I think it might get into the definition of urban versus rural, and that could be where that area could possibly count.
When the NRCS gets involved, does the city come to them with a project or with a problem?
A problem,
Ah,
a request, yeah.
right.
for assistance.
So
Mhm,
the city would only say, we have a vulnerability
mhm,
to flooding.
mhm.
Can you give us an idea of what we can do? Is that
That's
sort of like correct what it is? Okay.
Mhm. Yeah,
Because we haven't totally decided, what we would recommend. So I didn't know if that was something we had to do first or not.
yeah, so, I think one of the nice fits for this with the town and the situation with the sea level is that, the first step would be the development of a plan, and that's assessing all the alternatives to what could be done. I'll even back up before that. So, we're here tonight, you're interested in our program. The first step really would be that we would identify a sponsor. In this case, it could be the town. It's going to be, and that was in part in this document that I sent you.
Right.
A sponsor is entities legally organized under state law or by any Indian tribe or tribal organization having the authority to carry out, operate, and maintain works of improvement. So typically, it's a government entity. It can also be a soil conservation district because they are government entities. So I did mention something to Kevin about that when we were walking in. So they have to have the power of eminent domain and the authority to levy taxes and,
Which we did.
but
Okay.
That could be a problem.
So, yeah, I was gonna ask, is there a benefit city versus conservation district to be the sponsor?
I don't know that there would be. I mean, it might depend more on the project, whether, one benefits versus the other. I think in this case, if the city was willing to do it, that would be beneficial because, that's who has the really invested interest in this project going through and have the local contacts. So it's really the sponsor's role in the development of the plan and all is to make those local contacts and make sure that, the information is getting out there. Part of the requirements would be, public participation and outreach. So the sponsor, would assist us and the contractor in getting the word out and having the public meetings and making sure we know those requirements and helping people come to consensus on what the work would be. For perspective, in the state of Delaware, the main use of this watershed program historically has been to dig off the drainage ditch systems in the southern part of the state. And, I don't know how much you really notice as you drive up and down the state, especially Sussex and Kent counties, but there really wouldn't be agriculture or even possibly road systems without, the extensive drainage that's done there. We don't really participate in that kind of work so much anymore. It takes awful lot of environmental evaluation to get through these projects, and that doesn't usually work anymore. Wetlands were drained in the process, but back in the day, that this funded those ditches for flood control and, you know, agricultural management. And so, the sponsors were typically, the districts then,
Conservation.
yeah, the conservation districts, because they knew the landowners.
Well, the city council has created this task force, so I think that if in there is a location that they would be the ones who would be happy, I hope. You know, because this is their project.
Right, yeah, I think that would make the most sense.
Yeah,
So back to, you know, the steps, so the sponsor would really, the very first step would come to our agency and basically make that formal request to look into the feasibility of a watershed project to, you know, and then just kind of stating the intent being that, you know, the flooding concerns due to sea level rise and that the task force identified, you know, that this could be a
Right.
potential,
so that's basically you say what the problem is and can you help? Is that what the letter would ask?
yeah, and I can help you develop that.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Okay.
And as a result of that request, our first step would then to be basically a formal feasibility investigation to make sure that it is a fit for the program.
Mhm.
And that, you know, there could be a project, a viable project, and that, you know, the sponsor does meet the requirements and that all the other requirements of the program could be met, like that 20% ag. So it's called a preliminary investigation feasibility report, PIPR. And that, in the past, that was a little less formal. It's been formalized in recent years, and most likely we would even hire a consultant to do that report, just to make sure that the report meets all the requirements. There's money in our budget set aside for that. So that would happen. Well, when I say fairly quickly, I don't know what kind of timelines you're used to, but I'll just say it, you know, upfront, this is a very long-term project that we're talking about.
Yes,
as you know,
right.
so.
So you prepare this
Oh,
I
I
have
sent
a
you the
copy of
PIPR
it,
stuff. yeah.
preliminary investigative feasibility
Yeah.
report. Which then, if we do sort of pass this report, then you would start any kind of engineering, looking into possible solutions. Is that right?
Yes, then we would start the planning process. And again, we would be hiring that out, you know, the work to a consultant that is set up to work with our agency on this type of work. And the main thing about a watershed plan is that it has to go through the NEPA process, the National Environmental Policy Act process, which identifies, you know, the environmental concerns, the rare and endangered species, the economics in the project. And it has to, the plan has to evaluate the alternatives that, you know, that could be used to solve the problem, as well as evaluate what happens if you don't do anything, and then obviously pick the better alternative. So, you know, it's gonna be to solve the flooding problems, but there could be various ways to solve the flooding problems.
Right.
And I don't know, I'm trying to think of a good example, but I mean, I don't know the town well enough in the situation, but you know, you've got the dikes, and so maybe one alternative is to raise the dikes. But maybe another
City of
alternative.
Newcastle, Delaware, meetings at
Where? Yeah. Another alternative might be to, I don't know, do some other flood control, you know, upstream of some of the tributaries that come into the town, you know, maybe, and there would be, you know, extensive hydraulic and hydrologic assessments of, you know, where's the water coming from and the timing of it all. And so various alternatives will be evaluated, and then, you know, the best economic and social and environmental alternative would be picked. And,
All those things are taken into consideration in the
have to
possibility.
be, yeah, because of the law. And so that process, you know, that's probably going to be about a 18-month to 2-year process to get that plan developed, and then, you know, reviewed and approved by our agency, and then then you've got a watershed plan, and, you know, the example, it would just basically, you know, look like a document, but of that size or so. This was done for the Upper Nanticoke River watershed for land treatment back in the 90s. Not for the ditches, but for all of the farmland in the watershed, you know, what you could do for water quality at the time. So just an example. So you've got the plan in your hand, you or the town, I should say, the sponsor would have the plan. Then the next step would be the design of the works of improvement that were identified, whether it's, you know, dikes, dams, stormwater retrofit, you know, to the water system, or things that I'm not even thinking of, but, you know, whatever is recommended, then we'll fund the design for those projects that are agreed upon.
Now,
Hey, but yes, so
Yeah.
my understanding correctly, you're saying that we just bring the problem to you and you're.
Too good to be true, yeah, yeah. If, you know, if everything falls into place and it's eligible, yes, yeah.
I
that's-
mean, we don't need to make recommendations as far as what we think.
Well, you certainly would have, yes, you would want to, you know, have a voice in that, and whenever, you know, we start with our consultant and working on developing the plan, we would put your intentions into that scope of work that they're gonna be using to evaluate the
But
alternatives.
this doesn't have to be before we make the request, though, right?
No,
This
you're
is in the
basically
pro- in
gonna
the
say,
process, huh?
we want help with our flooding.
Right.
Okay, or potential flooding, and part of that also, you know, probably involving some study about sea level rise and, you know, what the potential impacts are.
But we could go in
Yeah.
with the idea that we're recommending using this money for raising the dikes, and consultants may come back with a different recommendation.
Good, yeah, they might have other alternatives. And I'm going to just put this out here, and I've checked, didn't get a response yet, but I don't know if there will be concerns about overlapping our program with the dikes that the Corps of Engineers constructed and maintained, because, you know, they fund any maintenance to that and repairs. And so, you know, whether we can fund and, you know, construct work, obviously, they would have to approve anything we would do, but I would have, you know, we wouldn't get too far down the road before we verify that that can be done, and we can actually do anything on the dikes.
Okay.
But if we can't do anything on the dikes, I'm not gonna say that doesn't mean there's other things we can't do. I feel like this is really a good fit for the program, and, you know, without knowing the whole situation, I think there's some work that, I mean, you know a little bit about our program. So.
And just because we already have dikes doesn't mean that the areas where there aren't dikes, that we have to put dikes, we could do something else, right?
Mhm.
And that's what the consultant would
Right.
examine is.
Right, is what's the best fit?
You know, it might be, you know, a combination of, you know, individual home flood protection, new dike, enhanced dike, and maybe as Ann said, you know, the federal government has their folkways, and maybe I think what she's trying to determine is whether or not, since the Corps has the RIP program responsibility for the dikes that, you know, were improved on behalf of the town or the city, you know, USDA is just gotta make sure that there's no competing, overlapping, you know, double dipping, you know, it's not the right word, but, you know, there's not
Right.
dual responsibility for one problem. So that's part of the due diligence that, you know, she'll have to do probably at the national office or, you know, to figure that out at this point. Because this is, you know, a new world in terms of project scope and everything.
Yeah, this program, these watershed projects, for most of the country are typically flood control dams. We don't have any of those projects in the state of Delaware, but I think we might be one of maybe 2 or 3 states that don't have a watershed dam. And, you know, most states do have at least one. You know, we've just built thousands and thousands of them across the country through this program.
Can you explain exactly what that is?
Yeah,
Yeah, so especially, you know, in Pennsylvania, and, you know, just upstream of here, and say, I believe in the Brandywine watershed, there are places, you know, where whenever we would get flashy storms, communities downstream, would have severe flooding. So by building these dams further up in the watershed, it attenuates the flow. It collects the water and releases it at a slower rate so that the flooding doesn't happen to downstream communities. And I mean, there's still plenty of places in this country that they could be built, Ellicott City, Maryland is a prime example. They've had so much flooding in recent years there and, so
Pike Creek owns.
Pike Creek,
doesn't it?
yeah.
We flood here too in our communities.
Mhm.
We flood in certain portions of it and, people have asked us about that as well.
Right, so that might be identified as, a solution to some of your flooding problems to try to, catch the water upstream somewhere in the dam. So I don't know.
Is that
But as Ann has mentioned, this program has historically been focused in the rural areas of the United States. So, if you go to Ohio or West Virginia or Tennessee, that's, hundreds of these watershed flood control dams, spread out throughout,
Believe it or not, I
countryside.
think Oklahoma has the most of any state.
Okay.
Oklahoma and Texas, but
I don't think of that as a lot of water. in
you
it.
don't, but the problem is when it's all or nothing
Right,
there.
yeah.
Yeah, and it does cause severe damage, so, and not only, communities are one thing, but cropland and, the ag resources are also considered in that economic benefit to doing flood control, so.
Sure, you can wash away the fertile land or the ground, right?
Have you done other projects in Newcastle County?
Through this program, no, besides, well, I shouldn't say that, some of the ditches, there were some ditches constructed in Newcastle County.
Yeah, there are tax ditches and, southern, and there's a few up in the urban areas of Wilmington, but most of them are in the, Blackbird, Townsend area. But we did a PL 566.
Land treatment.
Yeah, well, study in the Appaquiddick back in the late 80s. Is that different than that?
Well, it was probably a watershed.
Yeah, it was a
and
plan.
I don't know that any construction done as a result.
I don't think so.
So, yeah.
I mean, that was one of my questions. I mean, can you get so far down the pike? Can you get your plan, but then nothing ever happens beyond that?
Well,
or it stops
there-
there?
In the past, that could have happened because the sponsor would have to apply for each phase. But
Okay.
because with this feasibility report that's being developed and the work that's going into making sure that it's a good viable project with, everything, and the sponsor has made a commitment. Right now, the way the program works is if you've got your plan and you move right to the design phase, when that's complete and approved and meets all the requirements, then you can, you'll get committed for construction. Now, the
No matter
construction
what the
phase.
cost, I mean,
Well, so, yeah, I mean, we would, for each of those, for the development of the plan, we would come up with our government estimate of what we think it should cost. And in the millions, possibly. And then we would get bids from these contractors that have, been approved to do the work for us. And it's a regional thing, so it would be somebody from the Northeast region likely. Not from Delaware necessarily. We don't have none of the contractors are from Delaware that are on the list. But, the cost would have to be what we consider reasonable for this type of work. A little hard because we don't have a lot of history on this exact type of project, but we have enough, I guess, to go on.
Milford Neck is having a problem with a lot of water incursion from the bay. And I know of several projects that happened down there that were sponsored by different programs.
Okay.
Is your doing anything?
State, is that- we aren't currently doing any work there.
Okay.
So that might have been more state.
Does the historical nature of Newcastle have any impact on this at all? Is it a consideration, that it needs to be maintained or saved?
I think that it could. It will also be what's the word I want to use, Kevin? Cultural resources. A
Complication.
complication, thank you.
Yeah, okay, I was wondering about that too.
I knew you could eloquently say that.
Just be polite.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, part of that deeper process will be to evaluate
Archaeological survey.
Yeah,
Every time I look at this, I think
yeah,
about that.
100 grand.
So I mean, anytime we dig a hole for any work we do on a chicken farm to build a waste storage building, we have to get a cultural resources review. So yeah, it could help, but
It could slow things down too.
well, it'll be part of the process.
Just
I don't know that
complicate.
it might affect the alternatives that can be done.
Well, in the case of the dikes, it was exploration and documentation and, memorialization, and then the projects happened. But it was a process that had to be followed, and.
And that was one of the questions I had, because we got copies of the studies. Since that was already done for the dikes, if you raise them, does it have to be done again?
My hope would be no. It all depends on, because, when you raise, you gotta widen.
Right.
True,
And the
that's
question
true,
is, it's
right.
as you widen, what
Right,
resources
What are
you
you
could
impacting?
possibly impact, and they may have to, if it hasn't been previously analyzed, studied as part of the initial construction, they might have to go back. But my sense is it was fairly comprehensive, so hopefully,
not a total redo.
not a total redo, no.
Can I get information on that,
Sure.
on the dikes and
Oh,
what was done there?
Do you want to?
I know a person who can get that too.
Okay. All right.
I don't know if you want to keep, we have copies of this.
Or you can email, if it's something you can email.
Okay.
Yeah, I
That's
could send you
fine.
a link or something.
Ed, could you go through exactly how this, if the city is the sponsor, how the city is involved in every one of these phases? Just because we want to make sure that, this doesn't get out of the control of the city, or, that's a question that was brought up when I first brought this ticket.
Yeah.
Because you are going to do recommendations, but I mean, those recommendations are just that, right? And then the city looks into them and that kind of thing. I mean,
And the sponsor does agree to, I don't want to say take on, but, they agree to the operation and maintenance. So just like with the dikes, there's operation and maintenance that has to be done. Now, if there's damage, that the Corps has the funding to come in and fix it, but I'm just trying to think, of what an example might be that would have to be
I think,
maintained.
is your question really about
Right.
who gets to
In the
make the
process.
decision?
Yes,
about
in the
what
process.
gets
Oh.
done, right?
Yeah, we don't want a seawall.
Is that interactive
whatever,
or is that
yeah.
all NRCS's call, or is it?
Right,
is
that's
it
what I'm
a
asking.
negotiation based
Right.
on,
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't understand your question. No, it's very much an interaction and, like I say, there's gonna be public meetings, there's gonna be meetings between the consultant doing the work and the agency and the sponsor, so that they would be involved, in every step of the process and, if there's things that the sponsor feels strongly against, then there's no reason to recommend it because so.
any other questions that I had?
Well, don't feel like it's the last chance to ask questions.
No, I just want, I had
Just
written it
email
down just to
away,
make
yeah.
sure I knew it. Oh, so you said that this, it's not a short process. you said. So the feasibility study takes 18 months or something?
No, that would be
A couple months,
couple months, yeah.
and then 18 months for the
watershed.
watershed, yeah.
Yeah. Which
And
is-
then suppose the city were to agree to one of the recommendations, then they would start the engineering, or is that the engineering that's already part of that?
Well, there's gonna be some engineering done as part of the watershed plan, because they're gonna have to, evaluate, like I said, all the hydrology and hydraulics, and they're even gonna have to do some kind of preliminary design work, enough that they can do an economic evaluation of the project. So they have to be able to at least kind of get a rough cost estimate to say, okay, well, if you don't do this project, here's what it's gonna cost, the town in terms of damages and stuff. And if you do the project, here's the benefits that you're gonna gain. It's a, you know, cost benefit
Right.
analysis. So they're gonna have to do enough preliminary design to at least, you know, have some of that done. But then, once the plan is approved, decisions are made, then it goes to the design phase where they come up with the actual, you know, basically construction plans to do the work.
Right. And the NRCS will fund that, all that process.
Mhm.
What about when the projects are designed and everything and approved? Will the NRCS have some funds for the project itself?
Yes, they will. And it it depends on, and I brought a few extra copies of this and I'll leave
Yeah,
this one
there's
too,
some
but, okay, so depending on the defined purpose of the project. So for example, flood prevention, which I think this pretty much is.
Yeah,
And that being, you know, the main purpose of this program from its development, the engineering is 100% and the construction can be 100% funded by the program. I don't want to promise that right off the
No.
bat,
no,
but another, you know, typical, like up here where it says agricultural and water management, which, you know, that's not here, but that's going to be more like a 75% we would fund and then 25% the sponsor could fund through cash, but also some, you can use in-kind services if there was, you know, the ability to do some of the construction inspection or hire some of the engineering services during construction. There, you know, there's ways to divide up that 25%. So other purposes being, besides flood prevention, there's also what's called watershed protection, which is flood control, water quality, that type of thing. That's as variable. So that's going to be probably, could be 100 for some parts, maybe 75 for some parts. So I'm on the back page of that. So it depends on the purpose of the project that's identified in the plan.
what about, when you say it has to be economically feasible, like, you know, the damages have to at least, is there a percentage like that, you have to be twice than the, you know, the damages than the project costs or anything like that? Because some organizations have that kind of a.
Yeah.
Yeah, require some specific
Right,
benefit.
yeah.
cost
One or
ratio.
something,
ratio, yeah.
I don't know that, I don't know of a hard, you know, firm ratio. I would venture to say that it has to at least be 1-to-1, you know. that
Yeah. Right.
Can't, yeah, you can't be, you know, spending more than you're benefiting, but
Makes sense.
it's gotta be good use of government money, I guess,
Right.
is what I'm trying to say.
One would hope, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
You know, a lot of people could question a lot of ways the government spends money, but yeah, we'll try to make it a good use of it, yeah.
Then we have another question?
I'm just wondering about limits on funding or.
Yeah, there are, I don't know that that's really defined in here. It's like 250 million, it's high. Yeah,
That's nationwide, right? Or-
well, no, per project,
Per
there's
project?
project
Wow.
limits. Well, there's certain levels, like, I mean, if you have such a huge project, certain levels have to go like to the president to approve, but with just this.
He's
would
from
be-
here, did you know that?
Yeah.
I've heard.
He may or may not still be the president by the time. we
Yeah,
get
that's
to
true.
this.
Yeah, that's right.
But
Yeah, it takes a while. right.
We'll see. Yeah. But yeah, there are caps on the amounts, but it, you know, it's a lot. It's a lot. This, go ahead.
And just to clarify, you said that dollar amount is for one specific project. That money doesn't get split up against more of the projects.
Yeah, well, and I should be careful with how the term project would actually apply to all of the work.
The water,
Yeah.
the
within-
watershed as a
Yeah,
whole.
yeah. So if we're looking at the town and the works of improvement to you know, reduce the flooding, that whole thing is the project. Again, it gets a little tricky because this program and all the wording in it is set up for a dam.
So now-
yeah.
Does that money include the feasibility and all that, is that part of that pot? Or is that money for once that design phase is implemented and then the project is that as it go?
Yeah, the limits are on the construction funds.
Stripping of the construction fund?
Yeah. I'll have, when we make the application for the project to our agency, we'll break down it, we'll estimate what we think the planning will cost, what we think the design will cost, and what we think the construction will cost. And, it's a very rough estimate, but
So my other couple questions are, with the green space, when we talk about rural, suburban, that kind of stuff, a lot of people affiliate population. And it seems like with the watershed, it's more so of, like the green space, the land. Does population fall into that criteria as well?
I would need to look it up. I think there is, to define a rural community versus an urban community, I think there is a number for population. I don't know that off the top of my head, but,
And then my other question would be for criteria, it's no secret, we're right on the Delaware River. So obviously the elevation, we're not that much. Does that hamper, help in any way? Because I can see it both ways.
Yeah, it wouldn't, I don't think, it wouldn't help or hurt. I don't think, it's the reason for the concern. So the fact that we are right here on the river and that's one of the sources of flooding or, part of the problem with the sea level rise. So, that's the nature of the concern. So.
Okay. And then the other one was, I see with the feasibility and all, they'll take drainage into consideration as well.
Yep, drainage, stormwater management.
And is that drainage for the entire city? Is it drainage for some outskirts area, how the water flows, whether it's coming in, whether it's going out?
I think it's whatever drainage could be needed to address the problem. So, if there are areas, say on the Penn Farm or adjoining farmland, to the city, but whatever we define as the scope of the project. If part of that alleviating the flooding would require some drainage practices.
And then my one
I
last
think he
question.
makes an important point, and that is, the definition of the scope of the project is a very important step. You guys have been working hard here, it's thoughtful, but that will be, I think, somewhat of an interactive process with NRCS to make sure that when you submit the request for assistance, you've really captured what you're trying to address. I think as Andy said, this ain't the last bite of this apple. There's gonna be some more discussion needed,
Yes.
with the count, whatever, the folks who are making these decisions, but that's an important step so that when the study's done, address the issues that you want to address, and then you go, oh, shoot, we missed this. So that's gotta be thought, what you guys have been.
And I see, as we're working on the feasibility report, the first step, that, I think that's where we'll probably try to, start really defining that scope of the project and how to, what to bring into it to make it eligible, of course, but also to, provide the best opportunity and benefit. I'll add one thing, and that's, however we can benefit historically underserved communities is a plus. Right now with the funding that has been put with the, the infrastructure funding and everything, that's.
Definitely fine.
Yeah,
We have those communities that are
Yeah.
vulnerable. here.
yes, and so that's gonna help you a lot.
Is this project, say we move forward with this, are there other projects competing for the same funding, or is each project kind of looked at individually and approved or not approved based on its own merits?
More the second, you know, there's, I mean, there's, you know, a defined pot of money.
Mhm.
But right now it's huge because of all this, like I say, all this infrastructure money. Congress has given this program a lot of money right now. And, so, yeah, I mean, you know, we're all pulling from the same pot of money, but every project is evaluated on its merit. And I think that, well, I think that they like the idea of some different types of projects. I mean, there
Not just
are,
dams.
right. There's a whole separate pot of money, there's a whole separate pot of money that's set aside for rehabilitating aging dams. That's a huge problem in this country. All these dams that we built are 50 years old, a lot of them. So there's, you know, a ton of work that needs to be done on these old dams, but that's a separate pot of money from what we're asking for. So we just got that, yeah.
I just know that just in Delaware, when we went to that state meeting a couple months ago, you know, Dewey Beach is there, Rehoboth Beach is there, Lewis is there, Milford's there, we were there. Just curious, you know, about that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you know, it's always that way that there's gonna be
Sure.
people, everybody competing for money, but here in this case, I think, you know, what benefits us is that it is a different type of project. There are historical underserved communities.
We are special here.
Yeah, yeah, and it's Delaware.
Right, exactly. If you talk about population, we don't really have that.
And did you say there might be a situation or circumstances where the construction would not be covered 100%?
Yeah, depending on the identified purpose. So if we, you know, if in the planning phase, it, you know, basically it is proven that the, you know, flood prevention is the purpose of this project, that's when it is covered 100%. So.
Pretty much is.
Yeah, I, you know, I don't, like I say, I can't just sit here and promise you that 100% of the project will be covered, but
There's always fine print.
there's always fine print, yeah.
Is that fine print identified before anything starts? Where the city would have to commit to any funding?
Oh, yeah, you'll know, or the city will know way ahead. Yeah.
Through the plan.
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, by really, you know, I say that you're, you know, the steps kind of go from one to the next, but nobody, by asking for a watershed plan, you're not committing to funding construction.
We have the control of, I mean, the city has control over.
No, yeah, there's not gonna be like a penalty if you don't go through the
Right,
whole.
we don't have to pay it back.
Yeah,
That's good.
And in terms of covering the funding, if costs go up, in my experience has been every time you do any kind of construction, the cost is always scope creep or whatever. So you would cover that. If you said up front you were going to cover the construction, you would cover it regardless of where, when, or what they ran into.
Yeah, if this was 100% project, it would say that.
Okay.
And again, you know, we're gonna develop an estimate of what we think it should cost and not gonna fund anything that we don't think is reasonable for what is getting done.
And so to get started, the sponsor needs to make a request, identify the problem. And then the feasibility work would start soon after that.
Yeah,
So we would
yeah.
know pretty quickly if we qualified or not.
Because we need to know whether they're, you know, proceed on, so.
Anything else? Any other questions? Thank you so
So,
much.
oh,
Amy.
Barbara.
Oh, go ahead.
So we've had other studies here recently. We're wrapping up one now. The difference with the studies. Are they would they show the same thing? I guess I'm more directed to you, Kevin.
I don't know. Yeah.
And all, because I can just, I just wonder if people, I'm sure that will be questions like, well, we've had a study in 2017, we're wrapping up a study now that goes through a feasibility and all that, and then we're going through another one. So I can see someone saying, where people just asking that question, like, what's the,
How
what's,
many studies
what's-
do you need?
what's,
Yeah.
yeah, like,
I
what's,
asked that
what's the difference, what's one gonna show versus the other one? That-
The study that's going on right now is an elevation study for all the structures in the floodplain in the city.
Okay.
It's
And
for the
that is just,
structures.
these studies have been building upon each other, till finally we're at a spot where we're here.
Gathering information. So that information.
So that would be the difference.
Yeah, that would be information that we would, hope that
Would
the
be very
city would
helpful.
provide
Yeah.
to
Right.
the contractor to design the,
And to give us the benefit cost analysis in the first place, because now
Right.
we have a pretty good handle on how much, what the damage is for a given scenario, that almost nobody else has for their city.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
that,
so that's just
and
for the
that's why I
bills,
look,
yeah.
and that's why I look at,
Yeah.
the justification
Not
part
inside.
for.
I mean, it would, I think, make NRCS's consultants' job simpler,
Right.
because of all the great work that the city has done.
Yeah, that's.
With AECom and all
Right.
the work you're doing now. It'd be
Exactly.
like we got all this
Right.
information.
Yeah,
moving forward.
and I would, like, if you- whatever you have to send me, I would like to kind of read through what you have.
Do you know
provided.
David Athy, our city engineer?
Yeah, I mean, the name, I
He
know.
has,
I'm sure I
we
do.
have a lot of reports, that we've done over the years in the city. I could send you copies, or I could ask David to forward them.
We can get you links.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
or yeah, just point me to them.
Right.
Anything I can kind of just at least get a good sense of, what information you have and
Absolutely, you don't want to,
it'll help me kind
Yeah.
of just understand the problem better. too.
yeah.
Yeah, we did a vulnerability assessment in 2018 with AECom and the Delaware Coastal Program. And we've been sort of working through some of their recommendations, including the elevations that Jeff just talked about.
Oh, all right.
So we have been working towards this goal of trying to figure out how to solve our flooding problem.
Yeah, it sounds like you're, really on
Far
a
along.
good track here, yeah. And this could be just, this is one way to address some of the problems. There could be other
Right,
things out there, other ways to do it. but,
Right.
um,
I'm intrigued by the possibility that there's something we could do other than, dikes, but
Yeah.
interesting.
Retreat.
Yeah, you too, yeah.
No, retreat.
A retreat, yeah.
Well, and I'll say, I mean, I'm not gonna begin to suggest that it's gonna be the recommendation here, but where we have, sites that have just historic flooding, and I'm thinking more like in the mountains, if there's a stream that just is always washing out people's houses. This program also does buy land rights to, it's cheaper to buy the house than to keep fixing the stream that keeps washing it away. So, yeah, I mean, this and our emergency watershed program, they do fund, using some properties too.
I don't think we've gotten to that.
But we don't want
point
that,
yet,
yeah.
But that's what we're
Yeah,
trying to
Yeah,
prevent.
we don't want that,
But what office are you working at?
but Dover.
And is the state engineer for NRCS.
I gave, Kathy a card, but I have more if anybody else wants.
I'd like one.
Okay.
You're the federal agency.
Yes. Whoever wants one, can have one.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
I don't expect anyone on my way home to ask for a card. so.
Any questions for Anna? Thank you so much, Anna. It
thank
was
you.
really
Thank you.
interesting and very informative.
I'm excited about the possibility.
Well, we are too.
Yes,
We're just,
yeah.
I don't know about everybody else, but I'm a little nervous because I think it sounds too good.
Well, and I think the urban rural things gonna be
It's a little nerve wracking, yeah.
deciding factor probably for us.
That's one of the very first questions that I'll have to be answered, so.
Thank God for Penn Form, that might help us out.
The trustees own some open land, right?
There's-
I mean,
Yeah, a fair amount.
There's
Yeah.
open land and there's lots of marshes.
And so,
There are.
I
Well,
guess the
yeah.
question is how they define
How they
that
define it,
rural,
yeah.
yeah.
I had to ask the similar question because we had in Kent County, the Conservation District works with all of the communities that have their stormwater management facilities, and a lot of those are aging, and they inquired about the program to help, help retrofit or improve some of this, all these aging stormwater facilities. And so, we had to talk about rural versus, or ag, that 20% ag thing for that too, and, so in that case, it was gonna be a little bit of a challenge, but that's where I did, kind of talk to the folks about how we can be creative about that, and I think we can work through it.
Any other agencies we should be talking to?
For,
Funding?
similar type programs and funding, Top of my head, I don't
Well, the other would be the Corps
know.
of Engineers. And I mean, because, the state and the district and the county, did a couple of projects with the Corps in the Little Mill Creek area of Ellesmere. Okay, and, these projects evolved over 30 years. And, and there's federal match and, get a list of projects that the Corps submits to Congress and Congress approved and, it was a structural project, it's kind of redesigned, flood mitigation on Little Mill Creek. And, it was a big project, it was a multi-million-dollar project and it's worked, but it's a process.
And the court took that on because it was tidal, navigable?
Because it was a sponsored project under the Corps, Corps got 5 or 6 different eligible project categories, and it was on the list. And, I mean, it was in a planning phase when I worked in Dedrick in the late 80s, early 90s, and it was constructed 2010, 2011, 2000, when I was at the Conservation District. So, and there was an earlier phase done in the early 2000s. So, to me, this sounds like perhaps a little more rapid response type of, but it's, but
Yeah,
there
we're
are
talking
other-
relative here.
Yeah, right.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Yeah, hey,
it's government.
absolutely.
So things take a while to move.
But you're in the right place, at the right time when it comes to this and the sea level rise and the climate, resiliency. That's where all the
And
money
funding,
is.
I mean, if not now, when?
All right, thank you, Anne. I told Anne she could go home now because she's ripped over. And I really appreciate you coming up.
Oh, happy to
Coming-
do
Yeah,
it,
coming
yeah.
up, that's right.
Like I say, I'm
Yeah.
excited.
Oh, that's so
Something
good
can
to
happen
hear.
here.
Yeah, thanks
yeah.
a lot.
Okay, well, very nice to meet everybody.
Nice
to
We'll
meet
talk
you.
to soon.
Thank you so much.
See you.
Yeah.
Okay, so now on the agenda is public comments. So this is for agenda items. If anybody has any comments, if you would please state your name and address. And you have 3 minutes to make a comment if you want one. This is just for agenda items right now. Okay. Okay, so on the agenda is a discussion of other funding sources. I don't know if everybody had their, everything that they needed to say last month about funding. I think
No, I
Gail, you had
have.
something.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
have just a couple of things. One, I saw this in the weekly. The bond bill funded Dover City for a waterfront study for $475,000. So, we can't, that's all done for this year, but something to think about for next year, if we have something specific to work with our legislators to get something in the bond bill. And the other thing, and Mike, you were just asking, at the last meeting, I hadn't made a connection with FEMA. But I have made that connection with Philip Kane. Have you worked with Philip? No. So he's the State Hazard Mitigation Officer. And he asked me if I would just do a bullet point of some of our projects, which I did. I ran it by Alice. I mean, just kind of high level. So I talked about engineering for the gap, design, construction, the dikes, modeling cost benefit analysis once we get this new data, engineering, design, construction, evaluation, improvement of marshes and creeks where we flood in the neighborhoods, development and implementation of floodproofing measures for individual structures, and looking at our existing city code and zoning for sea level rise. And the response was, these all certainly look fantastic.
Yeah.
And the group reviewed all of them, and they have some great federal funding available. And they all require a 10% cost share by the sub-app. The city would be a sub-app applicant. So 10% of the entire cost per project. FEMA provides the remaining 90%. So the next step here would be to determine which projects the city is prioritizing, and if the city could do along with some sort of cost estimate, and determine if the city would be able to do the 10% match. So anyway, they got a
We should
got a
have a
very
backup, I think, right?
right,
Yeah,
why not?
yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, I know you've worked with, I mean, you've both worked with FEMA, right, on the dikes. I mean, or we have FEMA funding for, at least for Sandy, Hurricane Sandy, right? We got some funding from
Yeah,
FEMA.
the city got funded.
The city got funding, okay.
I believe so. Yeah.
We got funding for our retrofits for our stormwater management funds. For the ERA stuff, the part you guys voted on for a tax levy that we didn't have to repay.
Does FEMA only come in once there's been a problem though? I mean, once there's damage, and
There-
that's what happened to.
No, that's not the case. They'll be proactive, but it's a different kind of a set of projects, so. They
I
are
mean,
at-
this is the flood mitigation.
Yeah, but FEMA
Grant.
talks about pre-disaster and post-disaster. You know, they don't talk so much about mitigation unless it's part of pre-disaster mitigation. So in a lot of those projects would be like buying out houses, like you can give them a list in town of properties that are, you know, just not worth saving, but,
Well, anyway,
I mean, the FEMA is, they're not unlike the Corps in that they have, different programs
Very
that,
specific.
that
meaning.
provide different funding
Mhm.
levels based on the nuances of the issue. And for example, we used FEMA funding that Newcastle County secured to clean, and we just did it this spring, this year, to clean woody debris from beneath 5 railroad trestles on the Red Clay Creek for the Wilmington Western Railway. Yeah. So
That is specific.
it's very specific, and it was $250,000. We put the project out to bid, a company, one Delaware company bid, a company out of New Jersey, who got the bid, they worked from the rail. They had equipment, went down, picked up the storm debris, and, it was trees and logs, it was a mess. And, they did it perfectly, and again, in the past, we used to have a consultant who was a retired federal employee who is an expert on FEMA. He had worked for NRCS, but knew FEMA's folklore. And we used his expertise to do a flood protection project using DEMA and FEMA at Schoen Lumber. Okay, where literally the project was completed on Tuesday. The red clay, white clay flooded on Thursday, and they didn't get a drop of water in their show.
And that was a flood prone area.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, and then we did a project, you know, the district did a project for Christiana Hospital. Again, because there were, you know, their power plant and their, you know, I think their pharmacy was subject to flooding. And, you know, put up flood protection walls. So, you know, and so there's different, eligible programs within FEMA. It's, you know, but it's real specific. You gotta follow all the steps, and you know, you just, it's not unlike NRCS. So there's steps that you gotta follow to get to the funding to get things done, and you gotta know how to work, not work the system, but to manage the project to get it done.
Well, at least you got a contact now that you can.
Right, I mean, I think it's worth following up, yeah, with him and.
You know, and you know, you mentioned the funding that Delaware City got. You know, this is the Community Reinvestment Redevelopment Fund. And last state fiscal year, there was $70 million in that fund. This year, there was $90 million. And my understanding is, you know, that program is managed by the Controller General's office. Controller General's office is the budget office of the General Assembly. Yeah, this OMB is the state budget office. The Controller General's office is the legislature's budget office. And so, you know, there was 15 pages of projects on this $90 million list of projects. And the way it worked last year was, if you're on that list, you know, you have to fill out some paperwork and they send you a check. And then you go forth and do the project. And, you know, I'm on Delaware Nature Society board, and DNS got some funding to do some work at, you know, Abbott's Mill Center down by Milford, and the Ashland Nature Center up by.
It's possible we just didn't apply for more of that, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, it's, I wouldn't say it's well advertised, but it's, you know, apparently a lot of people were aware of it because there's $90 million worth of projects.
Yeah. Going back to NRCS for just a minute, Tish and I, and Fred, I guess too, we worked on a letter to the council, as Suzanne suggested that we do, to suggest that they contact NRCS and ask for a feasibility study. So who gets those down there?
I think we've learned a little more tonight, so we might want to
We have, yeah.
adjust that, you know.
Well, and not to interrupt, or, you know, but I would suggest you share it with Ann. Okay.
This is just to the council though, from the council to her agency.
But I got the impression from what she said, that she basically helped you write the letter. And then council
Yes.
just has to sign off on it.
That's right, but the letter from the council to her agency.
Right, but that she would help us write that.
Yes, exactly. But
And
this is
This
a letter,
the
this is a letter to
from
the
us
council
To the council.
suggesting that you
requesting.
request.
Right, but
What I'm saying is, let Ann put her eyes on
Right.
that letter, because
Even
it
on
will
this
help
one.
inform
Okay,
Because the
what the
council has
council
questions.
ultimately sends to her,
Okay,
okay?
okay,
I
I
think it-
mean, I got the impression she's gonna help us write the letter that we're gonna send to her.
yes,
And the council just has to obviously understand what they're asking for and what the ramifications would be for the city, if along the lines of the questions Fred was asking, if, are we gonna come to a point where they're gonna say, no, we can't do this? Or if the city's gonna say, no, we don't want to do what you're recommending, would we have any financial liability? And she seemed to say no to that question. But I think those are gonna be the kinds of things that the council's going to want to know.
Right, well, I did go into that a little bit in the letter, but I'd be happy to.
I think it would, you know,
This is just to go to the council,
I understand.
Yeah.
Okay.
because I want to get this done quickly and, you know,
I know, but if you just ask the council to write the letter, they're not gonna have a clue.
oh, I know,
what
I
to
knew
do.
that.
Because you have to say the right things or you're not gonna get it.
Well, and I think the right thing is, let me see that again, the 100% one is flood prevention.
Right, right. Well, and that's what the whole purpose of this group is.
Right,
So, yeah, I agree. Let Ann look at that and tweak it. And then basically you're coming to council and saying, are you willing to sign off on this so we can send it to?
No, that would be a totally different letter. See, that's what I'm saying.
And
This
they
letter just
understand
says,
that.
write a letter to NRCS. This is what you asked me, Suzanne.
I know, but that was before I knew what I learned tonight.
Okay.
Right.
So you
Right.
just want us to submit a letter to you that you can forward on to NRCS?
Basically, yeah,
Okay,
because they're gonna
fine.
want to know
Because
what they're obligating themselves to do by signing off on this
Sure.
letter and
So
agreeing
this
to
is-
be the
what you're
sponsor.
saying is this is not necessary.
I don't,
Okay.
I'm sorry, but I mean, I know I told you that. I'm not saying I didn't,
No,
but,
that's okay. I
but
don't
I
have a
didn't
problem with that.
understand that she would help you actually prepare the.
But I think it's
This might
good,
be good cover.
Yeah.
For the council to kind of understand what's going on and say, if you agree with this and support this, sign this.
That's what I was
Right,
hoping to
Right, so
do,
yeah,
yeah.
I don't think you've wasted your time. This
No.
could be, as Fred says, the
but
cover
I,
letter.
I think it's worth sending this to her.
Okay, I'll do
Yeah,
it.
you
let her
And let her
clean
know
it
that you
up.
want to proceed to have the council ask
Right.
the
Part of that-
NRCS to
Sponsor the project.
to do this, that the council's willing to sponsor the project. And
Kevin, you want to pass this down to Suzanne, just so
I
she
mean,
knows?
part of that, this letter
Here, okay.
from you to the council could say attached, please find.
Right.
That's what I did. I
A
put a
letter,
lot of attachments
know,
on there.
From the
feasibilities,
council to, but,
I
yeah.
was gonna attach this, I was gonna attach this other thing
Yeah,
that
but
explains. This
We're
thing
suggesting
explains.
attach the letter that they're gonna sign.
Right, that's the important.
Absolutely, I knew that we'd have to do
yeah,
that.
here, I don't need two copies.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
That's okay.
Thank
Um,
you. Okay, great.
So you're
Then I'll-
basically gonna let her know, yes, we want to proceed with that first step,
Well, when she said that she was gonna help us with the letter, I thought, okay, great.
right? Exactly, because she knows the magic words to say.
Right.
Like historically underserved
Yeah,
areas,
it's gotta throw that.
which isn't in
There you
here.
go.
I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure, but yeah.
Yeah,
This is accurate.
absolutely.
Absolutely.
Oh, of
But
course.
it's just another word.
You can't
Yeah.
misrepresent yourself, or you're gonna get in trouble.
No.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, no.
But that's not, you still want to present it in the best light to meet the criteria that the thing you're applying for has status.
Right. Okay, great. Okay, so, the sixth, thing on the agenda was the discussion of pros and cons of raising dikes and filling in gaps between the dikes to the current 9-foot level to 10.5 or to 13.5. I made the mistake of assuming that everybody was agreeing to the 10.5, but I don't think may not be actually true. So what I'd like to do is to talk about it and maybe hopefully come to it. Although, if NRCS does the study and everything, probably don't even need
I
to know.
think- I'm not sure that we need
I was
to
gonna say,
spend that
I
time,
don't think I would take time to discuss this, because that's gonna be part of
the study.
Yeah.
the study.
It's gotta be redundant at this point,
You
wouldn't it?
know, so, I mean, I wouldn't even touch it.
I mean, we talked about that and said, oh, yeah, maybe, we'll do this on the dikes instead of, widen them. But we don't know the engineering background and everything that they're gonna be able to give us.
Right, well, yeah, I agree with that, and I was thinking that, that we would want to go at least to the 2050 level, but maybe it's something beyond that they can do that is better. I don't know
Yeah.
what it is, but
Why don't we just discuss the
Possible.
recommendations when they come back and say, we agree because they know more about it than we do. But
okay.
I mean.
I mean,
you
So
know,
that would be a
right
couple of
now,
months, that would
we-
still be probably in the purview, in the time period of our task force that
Right.
we would initially
Well,
got.
and as she was talking about the timeframes, that would certainly be justification for requesting an extension
Mhm.
of your timeframe. Because she's saying, you submit this letter 2 to 3 months for their preliminary evaluation to know if we even meet the basic criteria.
Right,
so now
We-
we're
if
to
we don't-
November.
If we don't, we're done, obviously, with
Right.
her. and we move on to evaluating this other stuff. If we do, then it's gonna be, that's when the 18 to 24 months kicks in. Which
Right.
puts it past your
Right,
timeframe.
yes.
But you could ask for an extension to await the results of that. Meanwhile, I don't know what you'd have to do in the meantime, because you wouldn't have anything to evaluate until you got their report.
Yeah, but you know what? Part of what we've been tasked with is notifying the communities
But
about
that's
what we're
true, and the
doing.
recommendations to homeowners, you could work on those parts.
Right. Now, I sent everybody something from the Delaware City website, and which is, they have really done an incredible job, I think. I don't know if where's my copy here? Flood management program, and they've got stormwater management, and they have lots of links for people. And so I went to our website to see what it looked like, and under disaster preparedness, I think it's one of the topics, it said flooding. I clicked on flooding and it went to a page that is no longer available. So it's kind of discouraging. You know, I think of us as being better than Delaware City, but we're not, certainly not in that. So I was hoping that maybe we could make a plan of how we would attack this situation. Do we sort of copy them? Because they really did a wonderful job here. Or do we do our own
What do you
research?
think, Jeff?
The good Lord gave me 2 hands to grab all I could get. We can make that happen tomorrow.
Right.
We can copy there.
No, but I mean,
We
we could reword it with the
we
same
both
links and
run the
stuff.
same
know?
MS4 program. We're both
Search and replace.
searching, yeah, but we are, we didn't annex Fort Delaware, so we're better than them right there. Okay, it's just a hoop. Yeah, we can get that up there. I'm not the webmaster, but I'll talk with her tomorrow.
Yeah, because that was embarrassing. When I checked on a couple of things and it went to a page that is no longer available. So,
There's no dedicated staff to do this, and
I know.
when we kind of do a page, when something comes to my attention, we fix that one little link.
Right.
There's not
Maybe there should
time.
be someone whose job is that.
Keep
is.
reducing staff. so
And you don't have that much to do, right, Jeff?
No,
You
if
can
you
take
keep
one.
reducing staff, eventually you'll get to a sticky wicket.
Alice, I didn't see it.
Jeff, you don't have any,
We should take a look at it.
you don't see any problem with just doing a cut and paste off of Delaware City's website?
Well, it depends on what their website says. I haven't seen it, but we run the same MS4 program. We use the same city engineer. We haven't fluffed it up and put it on.
No, I mean, you don't think they would object to?
It doesn't matter. The government can't copyright,
Okay.
and we can't, it's all available for all of us.
There's-
With some people who've stolen viciously from most people.
There's
Alice,
really
we
a
haven't-
lot of
we haven't all
it.
seen that,
right?
Hmm?
We haven't all seen
We haven't all
that.
seen it.
I
It was
sent it to
in-
everybody.
It was in last
Last month I
Last month's
included it, and I also
packet.
emailed it to everybody.
Oh,
will
it
get
was in last month's packet?
Yeah.
That's what I
Probably
found
got
it.
it.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, then I probably have it.
Yeah, but it does things like, it says, how, washing your car and what you should do with the
Yeah, I got
wastewater for washing your car, yard waste, which, I see, how many people do I see pushing all their leaves into the drain?
We have the Stop It program. We actually bust people for doing that, and
Yeah,
people out there. In fact, if you'll remember the billboard I got donated to us one time, which said "Stop It" at the corner of Basin Road, and nobody could figure out what it was. That was the beginning of that toll-free number you can call to. Heck, we busted Spelco Rentals out on the highway. We busted them for washing their trucks on site and threatened, that was close. They could have gone to jail for that.
wow.
That's a commercial operation. Huh?
They
We,
need to
we,
pay the rent.
we,
don't want them
we
to
get,
jail.
we get a little rent money once in a while.
And I mean, I think this is great, but something else we could do, again, I saw in the weekly, the Board of Health has just been putting little excerpts about emergency preparedness. I mean,
Totally
we
agree
could,
with you.
we
Totally
could
agree.
put like
Yeah.
little, things of interest.
I totally agree with you.
We're,
there,
we're
yeah.
really good with y'all on that, on Board of Health.
Oh.
The chair of the Board of
that's
Health.
Mhm.
I think
thank
before
you
it
for
goes up
noticing
on the
that.
website, we should look at it.
I noticed too, I did think the same thing, that it would be great to have, because a lot of people wonder, what exactly are we doing when the city has done so much already? But people think we're, we're sitting on our hands or something. Anyway. So what do you think we should look into what do you, want, Jeff, who should we talk to?
I'll go over with you paragraph by paragraph and we'll see what we can't find on our website and how we can do it better.
Okay. Oh,
But
thank
just
you. I didn't
quickly,
mean
and I'll be on
this to be a
vacation
job
next
for
week, so
you,
do it
really.
quickly or wait for a week.
I didn't mean this for a job for you. I
Well,
thought
there's
we were-
there's not much staff.
There's nobody else to do it.
No, I mean, I thought.
And
we
I'm
could
here
take
for
it on,
a
maybe,
little bit longer, so.
But if it's just a matter of cutting and pasting, then different.
Some
That
of that
was sort
stuff
of
might already
facetious on
be on
my
our
part. I didn't
website.
realize you could do that.
We might want to just show people where it is more easily. Like yard waste and all that stuff's on our website. It's just maybe not in the same format as Delaware City had, where it was maybe more convenient for the citizens to see it and study it and run their face into it. And that's what we always want to do with a website. Make put the sign right there. So maybe that's a good thing.
So Kevin, you came here for a discussion we're not having anymore, but what I was gonna ask you.
And I can leave.
No, you can leave. You can always leave, but, you, at the first meeting you were at, you said something about having been on the back of the Strand and showing how high the berm would be. Am I right about that? How high are we talking about if we were to, let's say, get to 10 and a half?
Oh,
Or even now, every 9, how high?
well,
You're probably
it's
talking
it's
about
8, actually.
Is it
Yeah,
8? Oh,
yeah,
okay.
it's 8. I said 9, and that's, and Dave corrected me appropriately. It's 8. The dams are, the dikes are 8.
Right.
Okay, and so, when we were looking at putting a wall, in front of the Strand, as I recall, we had our survey crew go out and put stakes and mark the stake to show where the 8-foot elevation would be. And, people had different reactions, of course.
Because it's not really 8 feet, it's like whatever
3
feet, it's
feet,
already
4
above
feet,
sea
right.
level, and
3
then
feet
the
above where it
difference,
is, or,
yeah.
yeah, and, so,
But it was very helpful
because you can visualize.
because you
it.
can
Exactly.
visualize.
That's
So-
exactly what I was
So
saying.
to do a berm, I think would be out closer to the river. But if you put a stake there, you go, oh, okay, so now I can't see that, but, it's all right.
Well, again, that was the whole purpose. It gave, the property owner some sense of, well, ooh, okay. Yeah, I like this, or no, I don't like that, because I can't see what I like to see, which is, my $1 million view along the river, and I appreciate that.
But you also want to keep it.
Right,
Sure.
Yeah,
right,
and-
the basement pumped out.
That's right, but that's, that was something we did, during, we were working with.
I haven't seen
Gail
that in
and
a long
folks on
time.
the Strand.
So was the person who said no, was it because of the height? Or was it because of the cost?
Most of the people were okay, but we had a couple people who didn't want their people out.
It was
And
about
some
the view.
people, yeah, it was about the view, but as Kevin said, it was right behind the garden. So he was staking for a wall, which would kind of surround the back, like right behind the garden, not out by the river. And some people, one of my neighbors objected to that.
Well,
They
some of
didn't
the,
want a wall
some of
right
the
there.
berms are, you hardly notice.
I
them.
know, they're just like a little
It's
bump.
such a
Is that
general, gradual.
Is that proposal private funding?
No, we were, to get Kevin involved.
No, the one that didn't go through, that
Yeah.
whole,
I
the
mean-
building and the wall that was shot down.
So
by
I think we
Cumberland.
got funding from Senator Porter.
We got funding to do the
Just do the,
study,
yeah,
okay?
just to do
And
the
then,
study.
if in fact it had moved to construction, it probably would have been funded with money from us and maybe, from the General Assembly.
Okay, way in Bolton, I mentioned that the sponsor would have to have power eminent domain. Does the city have that?
Limited power domain, if we call it a road, sure.
Well, what about a seawall? I mean, wouldn't that be the same thing? or
Well, I
seizing
think,
someone's
I think
property?
just a general tap down to our legislators and we'll be able, I mean, we're not gonna go as far as Wilmington and just be able to, you know, eminent domain any vacant house, but maybe to build seawalls and roads and utility structures, I think we could get.
I
Our
remember
charter
some
tweak.
very basic discussion in council that eminent domain was the last resort
Right.
because it's very expensive and it can be very divisive in the community. And, you know, you've got your legal costs and so on and so forth. So you ideally try to convince people, no, it's not gonna look as terrible as you think it's gonna. look.
Right.
But
Yeah,
if it's a
agree.
requirement for the program that we had to be able to do that, then yeah, we.
Well,
might.
an eminent domain doesn't by its very definition mean no compensation.
Oh,
Right.
Right.
yeah,
Okay,
you don't even,
and-
when
and
you
a lot
take
of
it, you
people
don't
think
even know
that.
what it's gonna cost now.
You know, hey, you know, we're gonna
It
take.
sounded like Ann Baldwin said it would be covered in those funds.
I think, you know, if, you know,
with all the expenses. that you
one of your,
mentioned.
you know, one of you,
I think it would be
one of
covered
your,
in that
you know, an
process.
attorney looks at your charter, you know, which the General Assembly can modify, but looks at the town charter, it will confirm what powers the town has, and, you know, and it might have already been done, I don't, you know, so, but I take a look at your charter.
That's the other thing that we really haven't addressed is anything in the charter or the code that would have to be changed in order to, if anything in the charter or code prevents anything that we're doing now or thinking about doing now. And I don't really know about that. Yeah, I guess we have to ask Dan last.
I was gonna say that if you come up with a specific proposal, that's something that would have to be run by Dan.
Right, okay. Wasn't somebody that you were corresponding with talking about changes in the charter or code in order to, I'm trying to remember.
No, I
No.
don't think so.
No, okay.
For that being an
Or that
attorney,
that
yeah.
that the code has to be, you know,
Charter changes are much more complicated.
compliance with
than
appropriate
code changes.
core guidance and industry standards. I guess that's what I was thinking.
Okay.
That's the same. Yeah.
I mean, yes, I could see this group coming up with recommendations for potentially zoning changes, building code changes, and those things you would, you know, we recommend that the city change section blah, blah, blah of the code to read X instead of Y. And then, you know, we'd have to draft the resolutions or the ordinances and run it through the normal process.
Right. God, I was gonna ask, I know I was gonna ask you. We have a discount right now for flood insurance,
Mhm.
right? Because of what
Yeah.
the measures we've taken so
Yeah.
far. If we were to protect the city in even a more, in a more, I don't know, detailed way, let's say we would prevent most flooding, or would we get an additional discount?
Yes,
Do you know how much it would be?
no one does.
So they.
The
they
risk,
tell you
risk
afterwards?
management, you know, risk 2.0 has not been all the way fleshed out yet. We could have told you with much more certainty a year ago what the difference in elevating the dikes, for example, to 1.5 foot above BFE would have been, BFE being pretty much 9 feet along our shoreline. Some of it's 10, some of it's 8, but pretty much 9. And if we'd have gone up to 10.5 feet, then we could have got a discount for being protected in the shadow of an Army Corps of Engineers insured structure. But you know, they even, I mean, the fine folks in New Orleans had that benefit, but it doesn't always work. So it isn't 100% benefit to get out of the floodplain. And but yes, there absolutely will be, the risk management too. That's the first time they changed the rate structures in '73 when I started the program. That's going to be a lot more logical, and I imagine that some of the stuff we do and we have done is going to benefit us more. There are some jurisdictions just by the benefit of their size, like Newcastle County, that has way more opportunity to get more points under risk management one, and therefore got a bigger discount than Newcastle City did, but they came in like 20 years later. You throw a bunch of staff at it and get all these little things that'll get you up some points here and points there, and then it was just a point scale to lower the, you know, the class rating. And I think it'll benefit the city a lot, this new program, but no one knows how it's gonna do it yet.
Hmm.
So, a
It's like the
non-answer,
cable bill, you
a
never know
non-answer,
exactly
it's
what
gonna be
you're
lower,
pay
but I
for.
don't know, no one knows.
Comments from the task force members about any other
I'm
subjects?
just thinking out loud.
Mhm.
If there's any benefit, any advantage to a higher level government being the sponsor of this project.
Hmm.
Now.
A higher level of the government that was sort of responsible for the Army Creek dike that didn't tie into anything down at the south end. This is our town, our problem, you know, their water, but we're the ones that gonna get our feet wet. So we, you know, it is most logical for the city to be responsible for the control of the dikes around here. No private entities. We're maintaining dikes that we don't own and aren't even in the city. So
You're talking about Army
I'm
Creek?
not just thinking about
Yeah.
like, I'm just talking about any
And what?
project, any flood project. Project that we request through this, funds through natural resources.
Are you saying that maybe the county should do it or something like that?
County, state, and the reason I
I
mentioned
can't
it is
imagine how
because
long
we
that
have
would take.
Is it live, Mike? I'm sorry.
they can fund so we can get outside people that fund the projects themselves, but to maintain the project, you shouldn't trust anybody. Mom and God,
What I'm
mom
saying
pays
is just
cash.
the
Yeah.
sponsor of the project.
The
Just
sponsor of the
sponsor
project should be the city. We're the one that benefits. We're the one that's gotta realize what's going on, and we're the ones that are smart enough to know that half our flooding is riverine tidal flooding, and the other half of our flooding is aerial flooding from the large watershed above us, which means that sometime around 2050, we're gonna be pumping water after storms, and we gotta keep our marshes intact as they are. God bless the trustees. We gotta keep them open so they are our giant sumps behind the dikes, so then we can pump the water out for the next one.
Well, see, that's one of, I see what Mike's talking about though, because when Ann was saying, well, you know, we put these dikes up in the watershed, and I'm thinking, well, that would be probably beyond the city limits, where you would have another dike
You know,
that would prevent the water coming
we
down.
need to acquire the city limits, but we are responsible for every bit of water that goes through our city and into that river for its
Yeah.
quality. And we can't control the stuff that comes in from,
Well, that's what I was thinking, maybe if they put more of a control of what comes in, then we wouldn't have to have some, now,
But that's what they're gonna do.
I know,
That's
I
what
think
they're
that's
gonna
a-
look
they're gonna
at.
look,
that's a-
they're
that's a
gonna look
step
at it, but
beyond,
it's
but-
always gonna be our
Right.
responsibility. Because if they just keep dumping more and more stormwater from upstream, we're gonna get more and more water to flood our homes and our commercial.
Yeah, I mean, if they decide there needs to be, I don't know, a dam on the Brandywine or whatever, then that gets the county involved or the city
Right,
of Wilmington
yeah.
or whatever. I don't
but it
think
doesn't
we
have to
do
be right
that
now, yeah. I
Yeah,
think
they
that-
might point, in a perfect world, you do something there. But they'll focus,
Right.
on,
Mhm.
they'll focus on those projects that best affect and address the problem statement that you brought to them.
Right.
And I don't, I understand like your question. I don't see, a state agency, saying, oh, we're gonna do one with Newcastle. Same with the county, if they could be confronted by requests for 20 of these. How did, and the county council would have to pick and choose.
Oh, that's true too,
You know, I
yeah.
I didn't know that. It sounded like you're just looking for a sponsor basically, and it sounds like the Department of Agriculture takes the ball and runs with it from there. And the reason I even mentioned it is only because we talked about eminent domain. And I was just thinking, local government doesn't want to upset any residents with seizing property. It might be a little easier for the state to do it.
We'll shift the blame there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Alice, why don't we touch base with Ann and ask her what she thinks?
Yeah,
Because
she
thinks
seemed
it's sponsorship,
pretty
yeah.
positive about the city.
If she's gonna
Doing
write a
it.
letter together,
Well,
she'll have
well,
an opinion on
Yeah,
what's
I'll
best.
ask her about, if it's from, oh, but I don't know if we should be doing that just to shift the blame. I don't really, I think
Well,
we
like I
want
said,
control of this stuff. But if something that has to be done beyond the city limits, I'll ask her about that, because, yeah, because that would be involved, you know, that would involve the county or other municipalities or whatever. Yeah, so I would assume that they would be, you know, contacting them and telling them. I can't imagine anybody would be, like, if you're in Pike Creek, are you gonna say no to a dam? I mean, those guys get flooded all the time. I'm surprised they haven't actually asked for something like this, but anyway.
Jeff, we had a brief discussion about street flooding today,
Yes.
and you also mentioned about pumping water out from behind a berm. Could you elaborate a little bit more about that, and who the responsibility is?
Well, whoever doesn't want to get wet. The level of our water on average, you can just see it every time you drive across one of the flat bridges in town. That's the water inside our marshes, and it's almost the same for the four of them. So we drain them now by gravity, pretty much tide gates. We've got one electric gate to do water quality and mosquito control, but mostly we just have these series of large, 4-foot diameter tide gates, and 5 of them at Army Creek and a couple up here at Broad Marsh and a couple at Buttonwood, and we just have these tide gates, and one at the marsh drains by gravity. When the river level gets higher than
And
at
that's
low
not gonna
tide,
work.
nothing will go out. And now it's slowed down. I can notice that it's slowed a lot in the last third of the century. I can tell you that we've got less differential, so we're getting less water out. So the water will flow more rapidly at low tide, and it's working okay now. Eventually it'll get more and more problematic. So unless you want to have a whole river full of tide gates all the way down the 4.5 miles of the shoreline, then you've got some issues. And then eventually, the water level's it's just not going to drain. So at that point, you're going to have to move water somehow from the inside to the outside, or raise your ground inside the dikes, or retreat to higher ground. And that's a decision, that's the real crux of the decision for the citizens to decide what's going to happen. This is going to happen, by 2050, by 2070, but when you're going to be pumping, but you should be planning for it now. If you build the dikes up and are prepared to pump, then this town could be fine as far, even worst case scenario than what the scientists are saying, we should be fine until 2100, so.
Are we pumping any?
No, we have no pumps. We only pump when we put a coffer dam up to repair a tide gate. We just pump out Army Creek, we pump the whole marsh down, and then we pump we're sensitive. We try not to kill critters in the marsh. Sometimes with the electric gate, we've got a big storm coming and it's the winter. It's agonizing to think of how many little frogs and muskrats and stuff you freeze to death when you waiting for the storm, when you lower it down and the frost is gonna drive deeper. Thank God we've had some mild winters. I feel better. But we won't have that issue when we're pumping. We'll just pump enough to keep the optimal water level. But gosh, it's not gonna get better. It's only-
And you mentioned 72 hours, I think, today, about you look for the streets to drain within 72 hours?
If we have streets, suburban streets that are, and the water doesn't go off the pavement, and we'll look for almost all the water to be off in 24 hours. And all the water to be gone by 72 hours after the last rain event. No puddles anywhere, everything gone without high wind or great baking sunshine. But, so we're not gonna, we've got a very flat town, very close, very low town, and during rain events, well, we've had, Kevin probably knows better, but we've had so many 500-year rain events, we were getting like one a month for a while, which is supposed to only happen, well, they call them 500 a year, but you know, there's not much of a chance of it happening at a given time, but we've been having it time after time, so that nomenclature is belonging. The climate's changed, we're getting more large amounts of rain in certain time, you've got to get that water out of there, our pipes are only so big. The trustees spent, what, $1 million draining Battery Park, upgrading the drainage, and one of the biggest things it does is keep the foot of the fire station dry and the bottom of Third Street. And it keeps water off the park, so the park's more usable. And that's a really, you've got to fight those battles, but there's only so much you can do when the water level in the river is above the levels of the pipes, you're not draining water. That's why you put check valves at the end of all the structures you rebuild. So the tide doesn't come back up and you've at least got a little bit of, slop in the pipes to take a little bit of rain.
That's an eye opener really, because I was thinking that drainage, you just have to put new pipes in there.
They have to
doesn't
be
help.
above, they have to be above water, and so if
Yeah,
goes around, then so
Right,
we've
that
got,
go somewhere.
it has to go somewhere, and so you can either raise the city or move to higher ground or pump. I mean, I don't know what else you could do.
Or you could prevent some of the water coming in. I mean, I suppose.
Giant umbrella.
Some of it.
We won't, we can keep the river water, the tidal water out of here, because a lot of times it'll be a tide and then rain on top of it. So we've got to do two things, in our whole city. We've got to keep the tide from coming in for the, in these events. And then we've got to figure out how to get the storm water, the aerial flooding out back into the river and down toward Delaware City where the devil take the high.
Thank you.
Exactly. Well, we diverted. Okay. You look like you're ready to go, Kevin. Thank you so much for coming. Really
You want
appreciate
to talk
it.
to me?
Okay.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
I really appreciate it. Sorry we didn't talk about the thing that I was talking about.
I mean, Ann's really good. I've known Ann a long time. Yeah. Worked with Ann, worked with her husband, she worked at Denrick, so.
Okay.
She's sharp, she's smart.
Yeah.
She's a great engineer,
She
so.
really is very
Yeah,
helpful.
yeah, so.
Okay, thanks, Kevin.
And she's friend, so. All right.
right,
you.
thank
Nice to
you.
meet you guys. Not
Um,
with me.
So we're good. Anybody have any suggestions for our next meeting? For discussion?
I think it'll mostly be follow-up issues related to this letter and that kind of thing.
Maybe we could start to talk about community outreach perhaps, or, like you were saying about those things. All right. Sort of puts everything on hold, doesn't it? I mean, a lot of it on hold because of that.
Well, and also, if David is back
That's
next
true,
time,
yeah,
I'd
right.
like to understand the status of the elevation studies and
Yeah,
if we
okay.
have
The study has been, the survey work has been completed, all turned over, and the analysis is beginning.
Okay.
But it's not rocket science. We now know pretty exactly what the elevations are around all our structures in the floodplain and how high the first floor elevation is. And we're sending the architect in there to see what the elevation of anything that resembles a basement is in there for, but that's more to tell us whether or not the structures could be flood proof or whether they, collapse or something.
'Cause I know nobody's come to our house
We're my house.
and we're on
They
that.
were there. There's
thought
a
they were
survey
doing
crew
it.
walking down the street faster than you can.
Right, I understand
They
the
won't go
survey
anywhere.
crew,
No,
but
they did the front elevations,
But-
drawn some of the backs, but this is really pretty good data. I mean,
somebody had said they were also gonna wanna look at basements or crawl
That's the
spaces?
that's a different firm, that's the architect.
And that hasn't happened yet.
And they've got the first floor elevations by looking, we just assumed that the sill at the front door was the elevation of the floor inside. There might be a step up or step down in some bit structures, but
Not big
almost
steps.
all of them. And this is a rather broad study, and it'll give us the benefit. It'll give us numbers for the benefit cost evaluation for the, and of course, the new assessment won't hurt anything either to back up.
I did have a fellow survey my basement about 3 weeks ago. And he questioned me about the houses on either side. And since the townhouse on my right, they were all built at the same time. They don't have the same basement.
We got the low hanging fruit for basement elevations that they could do while they were just, you know,
So that's gonna be helpful with the financial part of it, what.
see
what's
whether we even
destroyed,
qualify
what we
for the,
don't do
because the
it.
first thing you have to do is to say, well, does this program fit in our parameters? And then you have to say, do the costs of the program underweigh the benefit of what you're gonna do? And the more leverage you have, depending on which program you're in, but sometimes some of the core programs are 2 to 1, some of them 1.5 to 1. It practically takes an engineer to do the benefit cost analysis.
Yeah.
It's a lot tougher than it was a couple of years ago. They did a whole new, more exact, bunch of science, so.
Suzanne, if this, if the council's gonna send out a letter, they have to agree to that at a council meeting?
Yeah.
Okay,
We
so
can't
that,
do anything
so
outside.
that
of
puts us a
public
couple
meeting.
weeks away in any case.
Right, I mean, the regular meetings, of course, are the second Tuesday, and the agenda has to be published a week beforehand. So if you want to be on the agenda, you've got to get it to them a week beforehand.
Right,
And it can just be, I don't know that we'd have to take a vote or be a resolution, it would probably be a discussion item, but Bill would be able to tell you that. At most, it would be a resolution, which means it can be handled, I would think, and which would mean it could be handled at a single meeting.
so hopefully we'll have something to you for the council to just say yes to this and send it on.
We agree to be the sponsor for this, basically, is what
Right.
my understanding of what the council has to do.
Right.
But people, the council members are going to want to know, well, what are we committing ourselves to?
Right,
And
so those
that-
questions that Mike was answering about,
Exactly,
yes.
and so that.
We
I
are
think
not
the
one of-
kinds of things that
Right.
Ann was gonna,
right, yeah, we are not on the hook for anything,
right.
Yeah.
But I think they're gonna want to see that, right?
yeah, right, okay.
So
All right.
Can I just touch on?
Absolutely.
something? So with this letter, Ann's gonna look at it, review it, put feedback in. And then is this to be,
This is a letter that I was actually going to address to the council.
right,
But
that's
then-
what I'm getting at.
Yeah, what Ann is going to, she's gonna look this over, but what Ann is gonna help me do is compose a letter from the council to her boss, I guess, Casey Taylor.
Right,
That would be the actual request.
right.
But I won't, I'll make sure everybody sees it.
Yeah, no, that's not wrong. So I know that we wanted to send something to council to have them go forward with this through the watershed
Right.
program.
Yeah.
So is that to do like as soon as possible?
Yeah,
Or,
oh, sorry.
or can we just include this since we're at that 6-month period where we have to give an update? Can we just include that in the update and let them know? Because we got a lot more information than we've had before. What I consider a lot more useful information is like selling points in order to back up the reason for that letter and all. And I think it would go good in the 6-month report.
Tim, I think I'll answer that. The thing is, this letter is asking the council to take an action.
Correct.
And the report is not asking the council to
No.
take an action. The report's just saying, this is what we've done so far.
Right, and
And so I think they should be separate.
okay,
But certainly your report can say,
We did this.
we did this,
okay,
Yeah.
that's.
and make
very well.
reference to the letter. And maybe they could even be at the same meeting, I don't know, that's not really, whether they are or they aren't, doesn't matter so much. But the letter is where you're asking council to take an action.
And I think we
Oh,
need
that's
to
fine.
get on this as
Go on
soon as
our
possible.
agenda.
I was gonna say, I just
Because
went there.
If
I
we
just
don't
went there.
get,
Yeah,
You have till October for your 6-month report, because you were established in April. So, and I would guess to try to, ideally on the August, but at worst on the September council.
Yeah.
agenda.
I put that on the agenda for next meeting, so we can
The
start
report.
to talk about what we're gonna do and how we're gonna create the report that we're gonna send.
But now we're having a special, obviously, the special meetings have the same rules. We have to publish the agendas a week ahead of time.
Mhm.
If you miss the deadline for the August meeting, regular meeting, if we happen to have a special meeting, we can add that letter to that agenda. But I would,
I'm gonna try to
in touch
get
with
it,
Ann and.
try to get it to you quickly. So
Right.
you can have it for that meeting, and I'll be sending it out to everybody after I talk with
Right.
Ann and she tells me which.
Here, wait, I can get you the.
So we all
dates
are
for you.
agreement about the letter, okay?
I just wanted to let you know, Fred and I are traveling at the time of the next meeting.
Yes, I know that,
Yeah.
yeah. Could just one of you go? Would that be all right? No, I'm sorry.
We'll give you an iPad, you can zoom in, right?
I understand that.
Okay, you'll have to.
But when do you leave?
14th.
We'll have this all together, the letters and everything by that time.
Yeah,
So,
The August council regular meeting is the 9th, which means we have to have this to Bill by noon on Tuesday, the 2nd, because that's when he
Yeah.
publishes the agenda.
yeah,
We're required by the FOIA rules to publish the
Right, so
agenda
August
7 days
2nd,
in
huh?
advance.
But Suzanne, it's an agenda item. You don't need the letter on the
No,
second.
no, we just
You
need
just
the
need to know
agenda,
that we're gonna have it ready.
right,
well,
that's,
that's true,
that's
Yeah.
true. You just have to know that you're gonna have it ready by the 9th,
right,
but
right,
yes, but
right. So we're gonna have it ready by the 9th. Right, okay,
Absolutely.
that's how you helpful, thank you.
So and maybe after you talk to Ann, if you want to let me know, yeah, we think we're definitely going to be ready by the 9th, then I can get it to Bill to get it on the agenda by the
Okay.
2nd.
Maybe she's even got like a template or something, you know?
Yeah, I mean, she's probably done this before.
Yeah, I'm thinking, yeah,
There's quite a few
Yeah, I
times.
think we need to trust her.
yeah,
But the sooner we get it into her, the better off we
Yeah, I'm
are.
ready to
Because if
pull the
we don't
trigger.
qualify.
yeah. Yes,
then
we need to know that right
we
away.
need
Know
to
that, that's
Start
right.
all over again.
Exactly,
Well, not all over, all this other
Right.
preliminary work you've done is still there.
Right.
yes, exactly. Okay, all right, so anybody else have anything that we need to discuss right now? Does anybody have any more comments from the public?
What your engineer did, the drawings up there, are they on the website, or can I take a look at that?
No, I actually got that from a letter that he sent out to somebody else, but anyway, I can give you a copy of them, because I have them on my computer, okay?
Thank
You have it. I have another one if anybody else, no, okay. Any comments?
I have a quick comment.
Yeah.
Again, I would like to really. thank
Your
you.
name and address.
Karen Igo. I live in Delaware City, actually.
Ooh,
No, I'm
Sorry about
kidding.
what I said about
I'm kidding.
that.
I'm kidding. I live on Terry Street.
I thought so.
But, okay, so
I thought I recognized it. Oh, my God.
a couple of different things real briefly. One of which is, obviously we're taking the long view here, which is why we're doing what we're doing, while y'all are doing all this hard work. So I know you may know there's a lot going on nationally with climate, with our president. And, today it came out that he could possibly declare a climate emergency, which would be huge. He's also got people down even in Rehoboth because of his residency. Now they're from Louisiana, really putting pressure on him to not do this LNG build out off the Gulf Coast, which, and their whole rhetoric is, well, this could easily happen in Rehoboth. Would you let it happen off the coast of Rehoboth? No. So let's fight it off of the coast of Louisiana as well. So I just would say that, bodies like this have credibility. And if any of you felt like making a phone call or sending an email and letting him know that declaring a climate emergency is exactly what we need, and no more new fossil fuel build out is exactly what we need. And those things are both in the news today. The other thing I wanted to say is when we're thinking about this going forward, as far as mitigation. I don't know, obviously, we're gonna have to pull out all the stops, but I really do believe in our rainforest, our rain gardens and that sort of thing. Even though it's on a smaller scale, I think our town is perfectly suited to take advantage of those types of things. And it can also be really community organizing for those types of things to happen. And it might mitigate things on a small scale where our under 6,000 residents live, whereas I know we need the bigger projects for the whole area. But even like what Jeff was saying with these pumps, like, is there a way to make sure that if we go that route, that we try to do those in a solar way rather than, a traditional way? I don't know. Those aren't my fields of expertise. But that's basically, I think, what I wanted to say was that, this body has credibility and it can lend its support to the big issue of why this is all happening. You know what I mean? So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Wait.
I'm sorry, that was the other thing. On that same note, this coming Saturday in Rehoboth Beach, those Louisiana activists, as well as other activists from around the country, are doing an action at the round stand, the bandstand, at 11 o'clock on Saturday, the 23rd. There's a lot of national organizations coming together to put pressure on President Biden to not do this LNG build out off the Gulf Coast and to declare a climate emergency.
And it's gonna be like 104 degrees, so it's perfect.
Yeah.
Because,
Right?
it's like, here it is.
And
Yeah,
I'll
yeah.
actually be there.
You're gonna be there?
Yeah, I start my week at the beach.
Oh, there you go. There,
Well,
there you go.
Go for it.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
All right. If nobody has anything else, then we will adjourn. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Did you guys pick a contractor for the?
My son